MegaRace 2! Released in 1996 exclusively for MS-DOS from developer Cryo and published at the time by Mindscape. That's right, kids. MegaRace 2 has the distinction of not being made available for the console kiddies and was purely made for the PC Master Race. And after giving MegaRace 2 a run or two, I think it's safe to say that the consoles didn't really miss much. It's probably why they shit-canned the PlayStation version, but I digress. Now, the first MegaRace game was a full motion video rail shooter driving game hybrid thing that I wasn't too keen on, where your main, only objective was to kill the opposition. The idea behind blowing up your competition is a good one, just done better elsewhere, but it's something you could have built upon in a sequel. MegaRace 2 doesn't go that route. Instead, MegaRace 2 opts to be more of a proper racing game. You've got weapons you could use against your foes to take them out of the race, but it's all about racing a number of laps around the track and finishing first, or at least qualifying for the next round. And in between rounds, you could use your earnings to restock on weapons and repair your car, or maybe get a new car if you could afford one. MegaRace 2 only has 6 tracks for you to race in compared to the previous game's dozen plus, but these tracks have branching paths that you could take and use as shortcuts to cut through the competition. Well, not literally, but never mind. Anyway, the way MegaRace 2 works is relatively simple. There are 6 tracks and you race each track for 3 rounds. Naturally, you'll have to qualify to advance to the next round. Rounds 1 and 2 are fairly similar. You make it to the finish line after 5 laps, all the while avoiding whatever obstacles are placed before you and taking out as much of the competition as possible before they take you out. Unlike the first game, you don't need to kill everyone on the track to move on, though it would be nice. The final round is a pure race. No weapons, no obstacles. It's all about finishing first to win this race and move on to the next track. Every so often, if you do well enough, you get to pick a free prize, which could result in either extra weapons, cash, or possibly a new car. Between rounds, you can repair your car and stock up on supplies, but you do not get to save your game until you move on to the next track. However, you can record some replays, so you could, revisit some of your best plays or whatever the case may be, so that's something, I suppose. So if there is any one positive aspect of MegaRace 2 that I'm going to highlight, besides the obvious one of course, it's that it made me appreciate MegaRace 1 a little more than I did previously. Look, that first game was an FMV rail shooter. It didn't look great, it controlled awkwardly, and while it's not a game that I would come back to anytime soon, I will admit to managing at least a nugget of enjoyment out of the game, and I was genuinely curious on how the sequel would improve on the groundwork established with that first game. And for what it's worth, on the surface, MegaRace 2 seemed like the better game on paper. You have a shop where you could buy weapons and stuff, you have worthwhile prizes that you could win, and while there's only 6 tracks in the game, at the very least they're much more interesting with their twists, turns, and split paths. The problem is MegaRace 2 isn't the same game as the first. It's not a rail shooter pretending to be a driving game. It's an honest-to-God racing game, albeit one that tries to maintain some semblance of vehicular mayhem that the first game teased, and it doesn't quite work. The cars in this game can withstand a bit more punishment. It takes more than a few bumps or pew-pews to blow up the other drivers, assuming you can even get to do so because the focus is on qualifying for the next round or the next track. I don't know, it's kind of hard to be the enforcer when you're not given a chance to enforce anything, given how weak your weapons are or how relentless the AI is, particularly with all the rubber banding that happens when you're in a higher position, or with all the constant crashing that careenes you off course and you get these camera cuts from different angles because we're still dealing with pre-rendered video for the tracks. I was kind of hoping this series would take more of a Twisted Metal approach, because that game had come out in '95, and while that's something of a different beast altogether, you had something to work with in regards to the vehicular mayhem combat part of it. But they went with a pure racer with some vehicle combat tossed in, and I don't know, you sort of lose something in the transition from rail shooter with cars to this awkward racer that doesn't quite feel right, that doesn't have much of a sense of speed unless you're using a speed cheat, and on top of that, control in MegaRace 2 is still pretty much ass, or ass if you prefer. Perhaps even more ass or ass if you prefer now, since this is supposed to be a proper racing game. You can control with the keyboard or the joystick or the mouse. None of those options help. It still feels ridiculously awkward, and not being able to save between rounds is a bit of a sore spot, especially since racing the same track 3 times in a row, assuming you win of course, is pretty tedious. Much like the previous game, MegaRace 2 is a game fueled by full motion video, and pretty much in the same fashion as the previous game. A bunch of 3D polygonal cars moving around on top of a pre-rendered track that plays out on video as long as you're facing the right direction. If you're not facing the right direction, then you have these awkward camera angles that will throw your game off. Funny thing is that if you drive in the wrong direction, the game will continue with the weird camera cuts as though you're playing one of those old Resident Evil games from way back when. I get that they did this to get around the fact that you've got video to play out your racetrack and you're limited on how you're presenting these different angles, but this will fuck you over more than anything. Other than that, the car models look pretty good. The pre-rendered tracks are actually quite nice and animate fairly well. They do a better job of blending the two elements together than in the previous game. And the quality of the FMVs themselves are a bit of a step up. But since this came out in 1996 and we were getting into the Pentium-based machines and SVGA, higher quality video should have been a no-brainer around this point. Oh, speaking of which, MegaRace 2 once again features host Lance Boyle, once again played by Christian Eriksen, and once again he is the best part of this game, as kooky, crazed, eccentric, and slowly on the verge of falling off the rails as ever. Our boy Lance is also joined by a female assistant played by Alice Evans. She plays the dumb, vacant stereotype, she dresses in different outfits, she looks pretty, she does okay with what she's given, which isn't much. She does not make it to MegaRace 3, not much else to say there. Like in the previous game, MegaRace 2 has a number of techno tunes to serenade you throughout its 6 tracks. It's not much, but for what it's worth, these are somewhat higher quality tunes compared to the first game, which I felt were glorified MIDI-esque techno things that didn't really stick. Again, nothing really memorable, but they sound rather nice for the time that you're playing the game. The FMVs have some jingles in the studio audience, and the sound effects are perfectly adequate, even if the sound mixing is a bit off. Overall, MegaRace 2 is a sequel that steers off course and right into an invisible hitbox, presumably spinning out of control while you're subjected to more camera cuts and angles than a WWE production of the past 9 years. Just imagine a million camera cuts within a 5-second period and you get the general idea. You have to admire the attempt in trying to be a proper racing game while maintaining some aspect of what made MegaRace special, well on paper at least, but the end result isn't all that great. Not even Lance Boyle and his lovely assistant could salvage this one. Nostalgia is the only reason to give MegaRace 2 a shot, and even then, it just makes you wish you were playing MegaRace 1 instead, which turns out to be the better game by default. And that's not high praise either. Oh well, only one more game left to go. Maybe third time's the charm, right? Right? Okay, maybe not. So look, just as a heads up, MegaRace 3 is a game that's set to have some issues running in Windows 10. And when I first tested the game, it seemed alright for the most part. Played well enough, I guess, for the little bit that I've tried it. But when it came time to capture some footage for the game, the most I'd get are a couple logos, possibly even a main menu, and then the game would crash. This would happen several times, I tried different things, and the end result remained the same. So, until I could find a proper fix to this issue, no MegaRace 3 anytime soon. I'm sure the 3 of you watching this shit are upset about that, but don't you worry, I've got something else in mind to fill the void. What might that be, you ask? You'll have to find out for yourselves, because I haven't a fucking clue. So, yeah. Later.